Hello everyone, this will be a quick little commentary over my Papuwa-kun TAS. This is a pretty obscure Japanese-only Super Famicom game. It is based off of an anime. So first of all, generally you want to move via sliding, which sliding is the fastest movement option in this game. And also the slide can be used to kill enemies. It's not always the best option though, like right here as you see. If I would have slided, the umbrella with the foot would have dashed into me and I would have gotten hit. Also another thing is, I kill most enemies that don't waste any time, simply to reduce lag, because this game is very laggy. As you just saw right before I entered this cutscene here, there was a big lag spike of like 10 frames where the game just froze. This is a common thing with this game, so most strats really are based around lag reduction. And not only do I kill enemies to reduce lag, but they also give me experience, which then I can level up eventually. Level ups are mostly used just to manage your health. It's not too important for TAS. So yeah, when you run down the slope you gain some very high momentum. Also just doing it like this gets rid of all of the enemies. Like each time you hit one of the numbers, they split into half. So first there's 1, then there's 2, 4 and 8. And as you saw at the last one, there was quite some lag, as well as there's lag all over the place here. But yeah, running down slopes gives you a very big speed compared to your normal running speed. And you want to preserve that as much as possible. Also right here I could have hit the grab while it was falling down already. But the grab doesn't become vulnerable again until it hits the ground, and when you hit it while it's in midair, it will just get frozen in midair, so you kind of postpone the time when you can hit it for the second, third and so on time. So just waiting until it hits the ground and then stun locking it is the best option there. So because, I assume because this game is based on an anime, there is a lot of cutscenes and text going on with like references to the anime. And pretty much every time when there's text on screen, like right there for example, the game just puts lag frames all over the place, so it doesn't accept any inputs during those cutscenes. So even if there was a way to maybe advance text faster or whatever, the game just locks you out from even attempting to do so by putting lag frames everywhere. So even though this attack has quite a long animation, it turned out to be much quicker than anything else, because this boss is only vulnerable when he flips. I think it's like a coin that he flips on the ground, and while he does that he's vulnerable. Also, as you saw, I had to move to the center of the screen there, so usually you want to go to the center of the screen when that happens after you kill a boss, but since you had to keep a distance to the boss itself while talking to him, it wasn't really possible to get any closer to the center there. But yeah, basically, if I wouldn't have used that ranged attack there, which damages everything on screen except for some very specific enemies, I would have needed to chase the boss down, and that would have taken longer than the animation of that attack. So like right there, just taking the slope. Also here, poking on that enemy and then going up like that saves roughly 40 frames over going up and around. It's very minimal. Also right here I kind of clip through the platform. It's very weird in how you can sometimes clip through platforms like that. So here I waited there simply because on the way back I couldn't jump over that sucking enemy, because right as I jumped over it, it would have sucked me into itself. And then the animation for getting damage there would have taken way too long, so just waiting there, then killing it, and then talking to the worm was faster than doing it later, since it can only be damaged in a very specific state. So yeah, just poking off of that second enemy to land up here. What you're supposed to do is, after the worm is done talking, like right there, you're supposed to use the form as kind of a spring and then jump up there. But yeah, you can skip that with a simple pogo. Unfortunately, the screen does not scroll further. So yeah, right here there's lots of lag going on again. And sometimes when there's too much lag, it's not worth using the dash, because the dash is the laggiest attack of all of them, which can lead into like the game running essentially at 30 FPS instead of 60, because every second frame turns into a lag frame, which can be prevented by sometimes not dashing. So there's a mini boss coming up here, and it's a pretty weird mini boss, and you can hit it while it drops down. Like right there, I could have hit it right a little bit earlier already, but doesn't really matter. And I could have pogoed on it all the way up and then pogoed from, like it would go from left to right if I wouldn't stand directly under him, which triggers it dropping down. But the thing is, if you pogo it on top and just follow it from left to right and pogo on it, it will never become vulnerable again, because the trigger for it to become vulnerable again is when it touches the ground, except for when it lost its shell, then you can just stun lock it like that. Except for the very first time, when it loses its shell, it has to go to the top once and then go down again. And this game is very picky with its cutscene triggers. Like, there's just a solid wall, a vertical wall at one point where if you cross that line, you just lose control entirely. So yeah, right here, just doing some damage boosts, because waiting for those traps to retract would take way too long. So right there, just taking a damage boost to get the first hit in quicker, then standing behind him to not have to deal with the fire, and when it becomes vulnerable again, just jump and hit it. As simple as that. It's pretty straightforward boss. There will be some more clever techniques for bosses later on. And some more fights as well. Some more fun fights as well. That's what I meant to say. So yeah, like right there, I already stood in place in the center of the screen for when that animation happens. It's not on all bosses where you can do that. This was the second one and I could do that. On the first one I couldn't. So yeah, as I said already, this game is very cutscene heavy, probably because it's related to the anime, but outside of that, the execution part, it's very fun to play. And a very interesting game in itself. So right here I will do some mini sips on those platforms. As you saw right there, I sipped kind of upwards when I dashed. That's not really a trick on its own, but just rather you do the dash at a specific point and then the game kind of thinks you should be on the platform when you dash like that, and it puts you up there. So those yellow enemies that you see with the Japanese characters on them, you can't use them to pogo on them, and they could in theory be used to skip over this platform. I don't know if it would do anything if we could leave the screen like that, but in theory we could use it to get over there, except for that they kind of extinguish after a certain amount of time, so like halfway on the way to this pit they just extinguish and go poof and they're gone. So we can't really skip over this, unfortunately. So right here, from one of the wooden pencils, I get pushed to the right inside the lower one, so I clip inside that one without getting hit, and then I can jump up earlier than I'm supposed to. I think that's pixel perfect, I'm not sure. Also right there, I clip into that big fish guy and then zip through it with a slide. And yeah, the lag is getting crazy here because of all the fire. So if I would have continued sliding there, I would have actually slided into the enemy, and then the enemy would have hit me, so I had to jump over it. Same here, I kind of clip into one of the wooden pencils to make it up there in the first cycle. And as you saw, right before I got to that fire conveyor belt part of the game, or of the stage, there was a big lag spike again of like 10 frames where the game just freezes. That's always there. This is a rather boring boss again, not much going on here. Just kind of have to wait until it becomes vulnerable and then avoid its attacks. The only small optimization here, aside from like hitting it first frame obviously, is at the very end I make sure to kill the boss on the right side of the screen, because that's where I need to go after. So yeah, in situations like that, I could have slided to the right once more, but because I need to stand a certain distance away from the frog when talking to it, the game would have forced me to the left again, and that would have postponed the cutscene trigger, so sometimes it's just not worth sliding, and sometimes the game just ignores it and just plays the cutscene anyway, regardless of you being in position or not. Also another probably obvious thing if you're familiar with TAS, probably, but something I will point out regardless, that it's not always faster for real time to create less lag, but just go for faster strats that create more lag. So while there are some strats that would have led me to have less lag in the game, it would have been slower overall. So you kind of need to find the balance between what creates the most lag, what creates the least lag, but progresses the farthest into the level. Also, this game likes to work with particles, like right there, this boss's attack. So this is not really laggy right now because I'm not doing anything, but if I would do anything while most of the fire is on screen, it would create lag, and that's not a good thing to do. Also, yeah, just one slide towards the end there so I could get closer to the center. I think I'm actually in position to where I need to be. I think I could make it there. Because yeah, 99%, or well 90% of the time when there's text on screen, you don't have movement enabled. Such as right there, I can't move at all. There are some exceptions, which you will most likely see when those exceptions happen, because I will move during those. Yet again, doing a slide and then taking the slope for maximum speed. And killing everything along the way to create lag, to create less lag. Or to avoid lag rather. And also to just have fun, get some experience. So I could have used those enemies to pogo, to lure them down for once and then pogo off of them and get onto the spikes. Unfortunately I couldn't make it over the spikes, but just very close to almost making over them. But even when I landed on the spikes, I still would trigger the cutscene with the snail there. So you're just doing two quick little pogos and then have a very fun boss fight. I think this looks fantastic. Just play punching back with the eggplant boss there. Also lag spike right there when we drop down further. So right here, even though this attack creates a lot of lag that I'm going to do by jumping onto the eel, it kills a lot of enemies in advance that then avoid more lag. So it's well worth jumping onto it and creating lag like that. As you have heard and saw because of the numbers there, it killed a lot of enemies and you saw it's still that laggy, so it definitely was way worth. This part would have been so bad if I didn't kill all enemies in advance. Also talking about lag, this stage is probably the laggiest in the game, because of, as you can see, all of the particle effects going on already and the enemies splitting into multiple parts as well when you kill them. So this boss again only becomes vulnerable once it hits the ground. So it's basically the time for me to run from left to right before it becomes vulnerable again, pretty much. Then I think a very fun part where you just pogo from left to right, get a key up there and then continue onwards to the left here. So right there, this is the only text skips you can do by just hitting the snail. You prevent her from talking more to you, which by the end of the screen she would still talk and you couldn't leave the screen. So just hitting her like that creates some sort of lag. Like a couple dozen frames of lag probably that it creates, but in the end you're about 100 frames faster leaving the screen. So for this boss you need to avoid standing too close to him, otherwise he will use this kind of paintbrush and turn you into a frog, which then you need to go to the left of the screen into the water to get rid of it. Like you see what he does with his paintbrush, he turns the fish into like different type of fish with whips. So you're just avoiding standing in position whenever he's close to you and wait for his animations to start and then you can hit it. Like right there, this is one of the bosses again where you can't stand in the center because there's just a cutscene going on that forces you to the left. So here, after this dialogue, you need to use, I guess it's an owl. You need to use it to ascend. And first get a key on the right and then go to the left. You can make the owl descend by pressing down on the controller, but don't want to do that for too long. So depending on whether you face left or right, the owl will go left or right, so you just have to manipulate it in a way where the owl flies the optimal path for you, which is not the easiest thing to do. It's not hard, but it's not the easiest thing. Like right here, this part was a little bit tricky to not get pushed off of the owl, but still only press down for the least amount of frames possible. And right there at the end, I abandoned the owl and just used the enemy to pogo and reach the higher platform earlier. Which at the end you still need to wait for the owl, but just flies to you at a faster speed than it would fly normally. So right here I don't really know what's going on, but you can deal damage to this boss or mini boss on every frame. So it just goes as quick as that. And using a melee jump kick attack was like 40 frames faster than sliding into it. Simply because the slide just... I don't know if it creates lag, but it's definitely slower. And here I could have used a kind of shortcut by going to the left and pogo off of that guy, but then I would have not killed two of the other guys. Also a little shortcut here where I kind of zip through the wall. But yeah, by going to the left there first, I would have not killed two enemies, which, as you see, I go kind of from left to right and just kind of making my way up. Because of those two enemies being alive, it created more lag than it was worth it to skip them. So yeah, stun locking the enemy again, and while it was off screen, killing it, giving it the last hit. And yeah, another attack that you may have seen in that maze-like part of the game is when you slide and press the melee attack button, you do kind of like a flip kick where you gain some height and go back into the direction you came from. I use that to reach the next highest level of the platform a little bit quicker, so I can maximize my my slides and still not go further than I need to, and also skip like a small jumping section at the end. Also here I think the slide attack is only needed for the first attack in order to hit the boss as early as possible, but I just stuck to it since you can avoid getting hit except for that one time, but I didn't really care to not get hit there. Didn't really do anything if I wouldn't have gotten hit. Since health is not an issue in this game. In fact, already in the next stage I will gain another level up, which then gives me a full heal, so yeah, health is definitely not an issue. So right here in the beginning, I can not skip this cycle, but I can skip this one by just jumping at a very specific frame window. Of course I make it first frame possible, but it's like 5 or 6 frames, something like that. Not too terribly tight. But here I can't make this cycle at all. It's not even close, so I have to wait for the platform. And then jump on the conveyor belts when they go against you, to not get pushed into the opposite direction of where you need to go. And here, there's a mini-boss coming up that... It's very weird how you kill it. Like, technically the boss needs like 6 hits, something like that. I don't actually know. But what you can do is, if you time your hits specifically to the first frame possible, the boss gets knockback, and the knockback pushes it off screen, and once it's off screen it just dies. Like, if you would hit the boss later, it would get no knockback and then you couldn't push it, but if you hit it first frame, it gets knocked back and you push it off screen and it dies. Also, I think you have to hit it with the attack I used. I'm not entirely sure on that, but I think I had to hit it with the normal punch attack. Using that guy to pogo off of him to reach the higher part, just ever so slightly quicker. So underwater your jumps behave in a weird way where... Well, first of all, let me talk about this. You see the shark in the top right? Well, it kind of despawned itself there. So, but yeah, jumps in water, you will see it in about a second. I will point to jump out. It's... this one right there. I covered quite a large distance there, and that was not only because of the water physics, or well, the underwater physics, but if you let go of right during your jump on an odd frame, your length of the jump gets increased, and the earlier you let go of right, the further the jump goes. So on one frame your jump has the normal length of a jump, and on the next frame it gets increased, and then next frame it has the normal length again, on the next frame it gets increased. But yeah, the longer you hold right, or well in this case right, the longer you hold the directional button, the shorter it gets even when it's increased length. So on this boss I used to think that when I get hit by the boss becomes vulnerable quicker. But eventually I figured out it just depends on when you hit the ground with your jump to avoid getting hit there. Like when I do the jump right there when the boss drops. Depending on when I land, the boss becomes vulnerable quicker or not. So in my first iteration of TASing this boss, I got hit for every attack. But then I figured out, well, that's not actually it, except for right there. You can't avoid getting hit by that if you want to make it closer to the center, so I had to space myself in a position where if I slide to the left and get hit with the attack of the boss, I land in the perfect position to just stand at the center like that. So right there, this was the kind of weird kick while doing the dash. Also here those enemies, the Japanese characters that fly, you can't poke off of them, so I couldn't use them to gain any height. If you would use the dive kick, they would just drop down and you with them, you would continue your dive kick. Also here using the slope again, just for an ever so slightly boost to the right. So on this boss, it throws random stuff at you, you will see 2 of those. And eventually, after like 4 throws, it will throw kind of a spiky ball, and you have to deflect that with an attack onto the boss, and then you can damage it like that. But in between throws, you can get as close to him and just hit it, and then once you hit it once, you can stun lock it. Because usually what would happen if you get too close to the boss, it would jump from the right platform to the left, and then from the left to the right one again. But yeah, in between throws, it's stuck on the platform, and you have to use that tight window. An even tighter window to hit the boss, because it's not vulnerable at any point. You can actually just get closer to the boss but then miss the hit because you're just too late already. But yeah, once you hit the boss, before it changes the side, even though you're very close to it, you can already, like, it will do 1 throw and that's when you can hit it. I think you could even stand on the same platform as the boss and hit it, but I decided to stand on the bottom and jump. So right here, it turned out to be like 2 frames faster to kill the second guy as well. The guy on the left there I had to kill to get past him without getting hit, but the guy on the right turned out to be faster for lag reduction. So here I got inspired by an RTA runner named Spiriax with this strat. He did something similar to this, just slightly slower and less optimized. If you get too close to the boss while the ghosts are still on screen, you would get electrocuted. So I barely avoid that. So right here, this boss has a weird technique to it, where there are kind of apples, they look like apples that fall from the ceiling randomly. And they are actually bombs, and the boss gets one-shot by a bomb, instead of like taking normal damage when you just hit the boss regularly. You will see me hitting the boss once just to postpone his attack, which would create lag. But yeah, as you saw right as the fight started, the bomb spawned already, and that's the boss already. And you saw like, he spawned some bug spurts kind of things. And by me hitting the boss, I prevented him from spawning more of them. But yeah, if I would have gotten closer to it than I was already, I would have lured the boss to jump over onto the left, and then the bomb wouldn't have been able to hit the boss. Also, I needed to get as close as I was there to the boss because there was a text trigger again, so I couldn't really make it to the center of the screen again. So this boss was actually the only RNG part of the game really, but the game was nice enough to give me perfect RNG right away. The bomb spawned literally like first frame possible when the fight started. It became visible on screen 4 frames after the fight started, so I assume that's the earliest possible. Also here you're supposed to pogo off of those rocks and then hit the bandage on its head once, but you can do it twice per cycle, and right there I hit the cross once already. You have to hit the cross 6 times, and after the 6th hit, that's when the TAS is done. So yeah, this was the final boss, and this was the TAS of this game. I hope you enjoyed it. This was a fun thing to do, except for the cutscenes. Like, this game is way too cutscene heavy for making a really entertaining TAS/speedrun, in my opinion. I still enjoy this game very much for its execution parts. But I guess if you're not familiar with this game, or if you don't care about this game at all, it's probably not as entertaining for you. But I still hope you enjoyed it. So yeah, take care everyone, and stay tuned for my next TAS eventually. I'm not sure what that is going to be.